We're live from River Valley Room.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of TD6 territory and Métis homelands and acknowledge the diverse indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, and Korazu, as well as Métis and Inuit, now settlers from around the world. I will do a roll call of committee members. Councillor Wright,
Good morning.
Councillor Knack,
Good morning.
Councillor Principe,
Good morning.
Councillor Rutherford,
Good morning.
and Public Member Burrows,
Good morning.
and Public Member Manda Mombe.
Good morning.
So everyone is here. Who would like to move the adoption of the agenda? Councillor Wright, you want to do that?
Sure, I'll move adoption of the agenda.
Okay, any questions on the adoption of the agenda? Seeing none, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Approval of the minutes, Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi. I'll move the approval of the minutes from the June 27th, 2023 Audit Committee meeting, the June 29th, 2023 Special Audit Selection Committee meeting, and the July 13th, 2023 Special Audit Committee meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. I do have one protocol item. I would like to take some time to recognize National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and Orange Shirt Day, both taking place on Saturday, September 30th. These days honor the children who never returned home from residential schools and the survivors that did, as well as their families and communities. By observing these days, we are acknowledging the historical and ongoing trauma that colonialism, discrimination, and genocide has on indigenous peoples. While acknowledging these facts can be difficult, it is a critical part of the reconciliation process. At the City of Edmonton, we have made deep commitments toward reconciliation. Our city is fortunate to be home to the second largest urban indigenous population and the largest population of Inuit south of the 60th parallel across all of Canada. Indigenous peoples make incredible contributions to our community and demonstrate inspiring strength and resilience that we can all learn from. The City of Edmonton recognizes that we have a special obligation to build a meaningful relationship with Canada's First Peoples. In early 2021, we co-created an Indigenous framework with the members of Indigenous communities, organizational partners, youth, elders, knowledge keepers, and city staff. The framework is an intentional step to support truth and reconciliation efforts in a meaningful way with Indigenous peoples who live, work, and connect with Edmonton. It represents a return to the original intent of Treaty 6, the mutual responsibility to build a stronger relationship between government and Indigenous peoples who share land that lasts as long as the sun shines and the grass grows and the river flows. This work is informed by the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission principles and calls to action. The framework outlines our 4 roles that city staff members can live out. Listener. We listen with open hearts and minds when Indigenous people share their stories and experiences. Connector. We connect Indigenous peoples to the programs, services, people, and resources that enrich community and foster relationships to create positive change. Advocate. We stand with Indigenous peoples to create a safer and inclusive city where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Partner. We work in partnership with Indigenous peoples on initiatives to improve the physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being of Indigenous peoples in Edmonton. National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and Orange Shirt Day is an opportunity to recommit to these practices. Today, I encourage my council colleagues, City of Edmonton employees, and all Edmontonians to consider these four roles and how you can apply them in your work and day-to-day life. Because reconciliation will only be possible when we pledge to learn from and never repeat our history, and commit to building a better future for all. Last, to Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people who call these lands home, know that we walk with you. on the path towards reconciliation. Our work is not done, but we remain committed to this journey. Thank you. Are there any other protocol items? Okay. All right, now we go into select items for debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Wright, go ahead, please. Yeah.
I'll select 7-1 and 7-2, please.
7-1, 7-2,
And I'll continue on and select 7-3, 7-4.
7-3, 7-4,
7-5 and 7-6.
7-5, 7-6,
And I guess 7-7, 7-8, if no one else is
7-7.
signing up.
Okay. There's no reports to be voted on that are not selected, right?
There is one private report
which
as well.
Oh, yes, there is one, okay. Can someone move the balance, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Okay, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. All right, Clerk Mart, can you please read back to us what we have approved?
Thank you, Mayor Soe. This morning, Audit Committee approved the following recommendations in the following reports. Item 9.1, External Auditors Annual Performance and Non-Audit Services Update.
Okay, thank you. Request to speak, none. Request for specific time on agenda, none. Any councillor inquiries? No. Reports to be dealt with at a different meeting, none. Requests to reschedule the reports, none. Unfinished business, none. And we are on to our public reports. The first one is Office of the City Auditor Recommendation Follow-Up Dashboard Report. Okay, and that is cross-referenced with 7.2, which is update on auditor's dashboard. Okay, administration's update. Okay, all right. Over to our city auditor. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Before I start each of my presentations today, I'm going to take just a quick moment to introduce you to the members of the audit teams. We have some here today and we have some on the call. So recommendation follow-up is usually performed by the lead auditor from the original audit. The monthly reporting we do to administration and the preparation of the report we provide you is done by Leslie Glasbeek in here today. She's our audit manager and senior fraud investigator, along with Alfred Apea, who is our data scientist. So Alfred's created, on the next slide, you'll see there's a new dashboard that we're testing out. We've given you just a picture of it here in the report. So this is, this is going to give you additional information on the age of recommendations, the number of recommendations outstanding by department, the number of recommendations coming due in the next 6 months, and the percentage of recommendations that were due so far in 2023 that have been closed on time. We also added at the end of the report a section to explain how we close recommendations and how we do our follow-up work. That's all for me. I'm not sure if anybody else is.
That is correct.
All right, so to administration, are there any comments? Okay, we're going to go to questions then. Okay, questions, Councillor Wright.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, so we've got some that are coming due September and December, and I'm just wondering, are we on track for meeting those?
Yeah, so we've actually already closed one of those since we issued this report. We know we're in conversations and reviewing documentation on the other ones. There will also be probably at least one that we get a new date for as well. So
And which one is that?
That's it's one of the safety codes ones.
And
Sorry, safety code recommendation 1. That's the one. We're anticipating getting a new date for that one. The other ones should be on track.
and why?
I'm not sure if I mean, I can give you briefly, but it's best probably coming from administration.
Okay.
But just from my understanding here, this requires a change to what's called the QMP, and that's required to come from the Safety Codes Council, and that's being delayed.
Oh, okay,
we
so it's
can't
an
close
external
this.
factor?
Yeah.
Because to me, clarifying a minimum number of inspections would be an easy thing
But
to pick a number.
it's tied to the Safety Codes Council, so there's
okay.
some time needed to get it from them.
Okay.
Unless there's somebody else from administration here who wants to answer that differently. That's what I think.
And all the December ones are on track?
Some of those December ones, we haven't probably learned as much about yet. We have revised the due date already on the response to homelessness audit ones. I haven't heard on the other ones that they're not on track.
Okay.
So
I'll ask administration then maybe. Let me see, I just want to see if my other questions relate to this one. No, they don't. So I guess, Ms. Flaman, so with the homelessness plan, I think we've got that postponed again, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We have an opportunity to align with Homeward Trust. This is coming down to capacity in the social sector, and it's the idea of measuring twice, cutting once. And in terms of efficiency, if there's a way that we can coordinate and align our efforts, that's just a better use of staff time and our external partners' time.
Okay, I understand you have quite a small but mighty team. Okay, and I think that's all I have then. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Councillor Wright. I will go to Member Maramombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the City Auditor for the brief update. Certainly acknowledge the fact that some of the long outstanding items have been cleared as well, so well done to the City Auditor and the administration, particularly the one pertaining to the disaster recovery one, which has been very long outstanding. The question I have for the administration is for what I see as one overdue recommendation, which is the Enforcement Services Management and Support. The recommendation requires the development of a performance measurement plan or performance measures. And this has been moved again to March 30, 2024. So I'm wondering why it would take very long to develop performance measures.
Thank you for the question. A lot of our work in our organization is matrix, so we are relying on the capacity of other areas. So for example, the work on Op 12 has required some of the work of our strategic areas. And so as different capacities and priorities surge and pivot, we have to do so as well. And we have an opportunity again to align with that work on EPM that will make our work more robust. This is not to say that we do not have performance measures or targets. We do. The work continues. It's just we won't be prepared until March 30th to bring them forward.
Good. Thank you for your response, and we look forward to seeing this item being closed off in the future. Then the general question I have is for the items that fall well into the future, and these pertain to the cybersecurity program. Obviously, these cannot be discussed in public, but I'm a little concerned by the fact that it's taking 41 months to, have a plan in place to resolve some of the issues. I know conversations have occurred. It's just something that I would like us to keep at the back of our minds, unless there are specific comments on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Now, next, Councillor Principe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to follow up with what Councillor Wright was saying, but I just wanted to get a better understanding of who is the lead when we're discussing homelessness. When I look on the Homeward Trust website, it said we are tasked with ending homelessness in Edmonton. Is the city taking the lead, or is Homeward Trust taking the lead on this?
When you have the spectrum of housing options across the spectrum from emergency shelter all the way through transition and bridge to deep subsidy to market and all the way in between. It's an overlap of responsibilities amongst different orders of government, but Homeward Trust gets primarily most of their funding from the Government of Alberta. They are the CBO for the province, responsible for emergency shelters, transition, housing, and bridge housing. On the affordable housing side, the municipality does work with the federal and provincial governments with various grants, and the city does come to the table with some funding. This council has been particularly generous and has allowed us to leverage those orders of government's funding. But in terms of addressing homelessness, like those who are sleeping rough and using shelters, Homeward Trust and the Government of Alberta has the primary responsibility.
Okay, and you had mentioned about the revised due date, just because of external factors and partners, like it's about collaboration and.
Yeah, and just honoring their capacity,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely,
and the whole social sector, they're stressed front line doing the actual work, and so in honor of their capacity, we are asking for more time so that they can do the proper work.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. Now I'll go to Member Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question for, I suppose, the city auditor. There are a number of recommendations in here that have been moved into 2024, as we've already discussed. But there's actually a substantial amount in 2024, kind of prior to actually revising the due dates. I think it's 23. I also read in the report that a lot of these are pushed into the future because of staffing capacity. Have we done a fulsome look at kind of the remainder of the recommendations that the 2024 dates are at this point still realistic?
At this point, we have not heard from administration that they're not realistic, and that we do rely on them. We keep in touch as they're working on things, and as it's getting closer generally to those dates are when those decisions are made to put in a new date if needed. So at this point in time, I couldn't say on all of them. I can assume they are because we haven't heard that they aren't. So.
And if I can just supplement that response, we get a monthly email, all of us, that give us exactly where we are, so we have complete line of sight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Burrows. So that concludes the questions on this item. Councillor Wright, you want to move the report?
Sure. So I move that the September 22, 2023 Office of the City Auditor Report OCA 02045 be received for information. And do you want me to do 7.2 as well?
Both can be moved together, right? Yeah.
And that the September 22, 2023 Office of the City Manager Report OCM 02049 be received for information.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Anyone to speak? Seeing none, please vote.
Councillor Rutherford's a yes.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay, our next item is 7.3 and 7.4, cross-referenced, Valley Line LRT P3 and delivery audit, and administrative response to Valley Line LRT audit. Okay, we'll go to City Auditor first, right? Okay.
Thank you. The audit team for this audit included Sharon Han, Deputy City Auditor, Jason Solowan, who's Acting Deputy City Auditor, along with Thomas Wong and Lily Vong, who are Senior Auditors in our office. The objective of this audit was to determine if the LRT expansion and renewal branch is overseeing the Valley Line LRT project to meet the city's cost-effective service delivery expectation. To do this, we focused the audit on the processes that the city can control. This is in accordance with the project agreement. So we audited whether the branch procured P3 partners in an open, fair, and transparent manner, designed contracts that are in line with best practice and protect the city's interests, clearly allocate risk between the city and the private partner, and performed oversight practices in accordance with the contract and without taking on any additional risk to the city. So we did not audit the selection of the P3 delivery model versus a traditional model, the concept plans, preliminary design, route planning, feasibility studies, or technical components of the project's design or construction. And we did not audit the work of the private partner. And as well, given the specialized nature of a P3 project, we did engage the services of 2 subject matter experts to assist us with this audit. The next slide, please. So overall, we found that the LRT expansion and renewal branch is overseeing the Valley Line LRT project to achieve cost-effective and service delivery expectations. We found that the city procured private partners for each Valley Line LRT project in a fair, open, and transparent manner. This creates the best opportunity for the city to select technically qualified candidates that represent the best financial value for the city. We also found that the project agreements for the Valley Line Southeast and Valley Line West clearly allocated risks, protected the city's interests, and set out requirements for communication. This reduces the potential for disagreements by outlining who is responsible for specific terms and conditions and the related timelines. It also protects the city financially, as the contracts include payment deductions when certain thresholds are exceeded, such as lane disclosures, tree damage, and transit impact. And we also found the branch is overseeing the Valley Line Southeast project in accordance with the terms of the project agreement, while refraining from directly managing the design and construction of the project. The city is holding its private partner accountable for the delivery of the Valley Line Southeast infrastructure in compliance with the agreement. And this includes both the overall cost of the project as well as infrastructure quality, which will ultimately lead to being able to meet service delivery expectations. The Valley Line West project is in still too early of a stage for us to conclude on the project management. So we did not make any recommendations as part of this audit. And I believe Adam has some comments as well.
Thank you, Janine, and thanks to the Auditor's Office for going through this with us. With me today is Bruce Ferguson and Chris Gentile from our LRT Expansion and Renewal Branch. Just highlighting that the complexity of major transformational projects like this, there are many considerations that we contend with. There are steps that the city must take to ensure that we're getting value for money, maintaining transparency, and ensuring the long-term safety and reliability of the infrastructure. As the auditor report states, we are and we will continue to hold our contractor accountable and oversee our projects in alignment with the project agreement. Although the Office of the City Auditor did not make any formal recommendations as part of our approach to capital project delivery, we continuously look for lessons learned to apply to our other projects to ensure that we continue to improve in the space of project management and project delivery. So I'd like to thank the auditor again. As noted, they engage subject matter experts to support the review of this, and happy to take any questions that committee would have.
Thank you so much. We'll go to questions now from committee, and we'll start with Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Wright exempted it, but she exempted all of them, right? So if Councillor Rutherford, you want to go first, or I can go to Councillor Wright first. Doesn't matter.
Oh, she's saying it's okay to go?
Yeah, Councillor Wright is okay to go. Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I appreciated this audit. Thank you so much. I appreciated this audit very much. The one thing, I guess, when we're talking about risk that I didn't see in here is sort of that idea of, like, it was very clear on financial risk. I guess, was it out of scope, or what are your thoughts to the city auditor on, like, that reputational risk piece?
Yeah, so the risks, when we looked at risk, it was how it was outlined in that project agreements. And so it was done in a manner that was in accordance with best practice, understanding that when you are in a P3, you sort of lose control when you give up some of that risk, and that's sort of where the impacts, I believe, would be on the reputational risk. But as far as the contract and the work that was done for that we can say that that was all done in accordance with best practice.
So when you when you contracted the P3 experts to work on this particular audit, correct?
Yes.
Did they mention anything around, some of the delays and some of the, because the general public doesn't understand that it's not us that are delivering the construction on this, right? That it's this other entity. So I wondered if those content experts had any other insights from a I guess timing. Is there timelines, reputation, communication? Was there any other comments made by them in regards to those?
Yeah, I'm going to let Jason answer that. I don't believe there was.
It was something that came up during our conversations with a large capital project, kind of given that whole time, cost, quality triangle. Obviously, the city prioritized cost as well as quality, and knowing that they couldn't quite fully control every aspect of the project. Reputation is something that primarily would have to be dealt with through communications. It's going to be a risk in any project of this magnitude. So yes, it was not something unexpected, I guess, given some of the delays that occurred. As far as ways to deal with that, that would probably be up to administration and kind of communications group to sort of figure out the best way through that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just grappling with this one in terms of, and I don't know, I understand the scope and I understand what the auditor did. And I do agree with the assessment regarding the financial protection, but I just am imagining myself as a Edmontonian seeing this report and seeing some of the perceptions of that line, especially, you mentioned quality. Quality, I know we have retroactive ways to control quality control, but we have had some serious defects in terms of quality on this line as well. So I guess that's what I'm trying to square now. And I'm grappling with it. I guess not that this audit didn't do what it was supposed to do, and I understand the scope, but more, is there something else? Is there a further conversation that needs to be had? I don't know if there is, but I'm just curious what administration or the city auditor thinks.
Councillor Rutherford, so I think with these major infrastructure, large civil infrastructure projects, there are always risks that materialize, and depending on the delivery model you select, you can determine what's the appropriate amount of risk transfer. In this case, it's a P3, so there's a significant risk transfer over to the entity. And with that risk transfer comes a bit of lack of the ability for administration to directly influence the performance of the contractor, but hold them accountable. So as it relates to this particular situation, from the approach of risk transfer, it has worked. Now, that doesn't alleviate the concerns related to the contractor's performance. The method to reinforce that is the financial measures, which they are experiencing on a daily basis as it relates to this project. But certainly, it is something that materializes when you get these large infrastructure projects, whether it be P3, construction manager, design, bid, build. Issues do materialize.
That's fair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I had actually was hoping that the scope would have been more like P3 versus in-house. So I'm just wondering, so it notes in one part of the report that only 250 was of the 400,000 for Valley Line Southeast was tied to it being a P3. So why did we go the full in along the continuum?
We didn't have a choice. The terms of the grant were the project needed to be delivered by a P3.
Oh, I thought in the report it says that only 250 was tied to the P3 delivery model.
With terms, and the terms were, in order to secure the 250, you had to deliver as a P3.
Okay, but there was 400 from the Government of Canada.
Right, but they wouldn't have provided the 250 unless we delivered the P3.
The whole thing, okay. And then, and the same thing goes for Valley Line West, even though it was 991 million, that was all tied to it being a P3?
Valley Line West is different. Valley Line West was assessed through our P3 policy and identified that we would deliver through a P3, but the model is a different model than the Valley Line Southeast. The Valley Line West is a design, build, finance. Valley Line Southeast is design, build, finance, operate, maintain.
Okay. And so then with that operating not being part of the West, I guess, with Southeast, I guess there is there's more incentive for them to complete and do it on time?
Well, both contracts are structured to heavily incent the contractors to deliver the projects on time. Heavily incentive laden. So, to speak to the specifics on why a contractor is prepared to continue to realize these financial impacts is not something we can do other than what we can do, which is hold them accountable to the contractor and enforce those financial consequences of not delivering on time.
Okay. And we still don't have that worked out, who's going to operate. Is that right?
Valley Line Southeast is operated by TransEd.
But West.
Just the way, and we might be deviating from the audit context here, but just the way that the projects were approved from a funding availability perspective, we weren't able to include the entire operations within TransEd's assignment.
Okay, and then you also mentioned value for the money. What about I think, so looking at the city overall, I'm just wondering the value for those that are experiencing delays or businesses that are suffering because of delays in construction, those that have purchased homes along the LRT lines, expecting it to be operational, have their values dropped? I'm just wondering about that sort of value. Any assessment of that?
Administration or the auditor?
Auditor.
No, that was not part of the work that we did to look at that.
Okay. Again, I'm thinking value to the whole city, maybe. That could have been. Okay. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that for now and let my colleagues continue.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Now I go to public member, Madam Mombi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to follow up on, the comments made by Councillor Wright, just to, put the in scope and out of scope in context from the audit standpoint, is there a plausible reason why we have areas out of scope, and are there plans to include these in scope at some point? And if so, when is the appropriate point to include them in scope?
At this point, there's no additional plans for another audit on this. When we do the audit, we sort of look for the area where we could sort of add value to the city, and that the decision to make the P3 was made, I believe, over 10 years ago by a different council, and it was tied to the federal funding. So we weren't sure that at the time when we were planning this audit that there would be much value. And as every large capital project the city undertakes, it's different. So going forward, those decisions will be made with different, different criteria that are in place to make those. So it was so much time had passed since that had been made, it wasn't sort of where we thought we should go with it. And so there wouldn't be a plan to look at that. I mean, potentially if another project were to start and to happen, there could be something there, but.
No, thank you for your comments. It just appears as though the scope was very limited, and clearly, assessing from the audit results, it may be an indication of that shortcoming, in my view. I do have a follow-up questions, for the administration. On the learnings land, I did hear a comment about, learnings land coming out of this. Do you see any real learnings coming out of this that are going to be applicable in the immediate future?
Well, I think one big learning is, and Councillor Rutherford touched on this in terms of managing expectations. To put into context, Valley Line Southeast is a 13-kilometer civil infrastructure project that includes roads, bridges, facilities, LRT infrastructure. So it's a massive undertaking. And as much as you try to predict the risks, an issue can really turn into something larger. And so ensuring that, that we are clear around the potential impacts associated with projects of this size for that reputation piece is something that we work at and continue to work at. In terms of practical lessons learned, understanding, the advantages and disadvantages of risk transfer, that goes into some of our procurement decisions for other projects. And in terms of learning directly on the Valley Line Southeast project, a critique that we heard was the external communication that was happening along the corridor. Again, you're transferring some of those responsibilities to a third party. And we've adjusted our approach on Valley Line West to ensure there was greater communication and engagement with stakeholders along the Valley Line West. And throughout our projects, lessons learned is a component of our approach to project management. So it's not just this project, it's all projects.
Cool. And thank you for that. Just to follow up on that, do you see yourself carrying out an economic assessment of the project? And at the same time, I need to know from you whether or not you have an opinion on the overall assessment of the project itself at this point.
So in terms of an economic analysis of how the project performed?
Yeah, just an overall economic assessment to see whether or not there was real value to the city.
So from an economic perspective, before we initiated the P3, we were required as part of the grant to complete an analysis of the net present value of taking this approach to the project delivery versus others, and there was a significant benefit to undertake it in this form versus a traditional design bid build form. I'm not sure we can or have made that dollar amount public, but it was quite significant in terms of the scale of the project size. As it relates to other assessments from an economic perspective, the impacts that the contractor has experienced have not, 1 cent has not been laid at the City of Edmonton. It's all been at the contractor's expense. So from a protection of taxpayer value or taxpayers, the taxpayer, it has been fully protected on the basis of the way this contract has been set up. So I'm extremely frustrated that we're as late as we are, but thankful that we have a contract that has done that in a way where when these issues materialize, the city's interests are protected financially.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Mombe. And next we'll go to Councillor Principe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, Mr. Laughlin, about on page 21. One of the sentences says, one of the things that administration has done is, well, okay, it's about fostering the working relationship. I'll just say that. It's about fostering the working relationship. How is that going, the working relationship?
So I think I would say this project has been a really test of trying to build and maintain relationship between the City of Edmonton and contractor. It's a continual effort for us to ensure that we have a strong relationship, but it has been a challenging project from that perspective. We've worked hard at trying to build the relationship, and again, we talk about lessons learned. Something that we've tried to apply to other projects is the importance of ensuring that you have a strong relationship, because projects of this scale will run into issues and positions will be formed and do form in terms of entitlement versus not entitlement. It's an important part, and it's something that we continue to focus to make sure that when we undertake these projects, they're set up in the way where we have as best as possible, a strong working relationship. But when you run into challenges on projects and there are pressures, and they are experiencing tremendous pressures, it presents a challenge to continue to maintain a strong working relationship. But it's important that we do that because this is a consortium that we're a partner with until 2050.
Okay, good. That's a good answer. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. And then I just wanted to ask, oh, by the way, I really appreciate the auditor's office for putting what's in scope and what's out of scope with this. It gave me a good understanding. I appreciate that. One thing I do want to ask, though, is about the operations, because I did read something in there about the operations, you know, ensuring that the south leg and the west leg are operating properly together. I did read something in there, but would that have been out of scope?
Yeah, that's identified as a remaining risk that administration is working on. I'm waiting because I'm not sure if what you're working on can be spoke about.
Okay, I just wanted to see if that was like a part of the audit.
Just to identify
Just
that
to
as
identify
a
it.
risk.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, okay, good. Yeah, no, that's good.
It's public that we do need to figure out, based on council's previous direction, that the desire is for one operator on this line. And again, because of the way that the project was approved, and we look at Valley Line as a continuous project, but it was approved in stages. So it is still something that we need to confirm the best approach in terms of the 27 kilometers of operation, not just the 13 and then the 14.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. Councillor Knack.
Thanks, Mayor Sohi, and thank you for these reports. I guess, you know, to sort of sum up what I'm hearing, and wouldn't mind the perspective on this, is that appreciate based on the scope, the audit was thoughtful. It covered exactly what the scope said it was going to. But I think what I'm hearing, and even some of my own questions, is that there's a lot of other concerns that I don't know if we've had an opportunity to adequately address that. And so is this something we're thinking about for the upcoming audit work plan that would dig into some of the other aspects of this project that I think many folks did have questions about?
So, Councillor Knack, we're not sort of legally able to audit the private partner here. So any of the issues with the delays, those things, we wouldn't be able to audit them to give you what you would expect to get from that based on the agreement. So we did audit what we felt was, you know, what was auditable in this project as far as the city administration and the work that they're doing, which is within our mandate. So maybe to be a little more clear, maybe what you would expect in the next audit plan, and then I can say whether or not it would be something we could do.
So I think, you know, we've talked about lessons learned that have since been applied to the Valley Line West, and I've seen some of those in action. You know, I guess maybe the question is, are the lessons that we've learned and have since applied to a project like Valley Line West, or potentially other future projects that would be of this scale and maybe of this design, are those the right lessons learned? Were there things that were maybe missed that we feel that we should have learned but maybe have yet to be captured? So more of that. I appreciate we can't audit Trans Ed, but I think there's still a lot of questions around have we applied and been thoughtful around how this project has gone, recognizing there was a separate audit, I think, what was that, 2 years ago, around the changes to our project management processes, and the audit was quite glowing, I would suggest, and was quite identified a lot of positive changes that city administration has made. But because this is more of a unique project under that P3 model, and maybe this isn't the only one we'll ever do, recognizing there is that sort of lens that we apply to large scale projects, is there something that we can dig into a bit further?
I mean, I can say that we did, as part of this audit, we did look at those lessons learned, and we looked at those processes to identify them, and did sort of follow up on those ones that have already been implemented into the agreement and the procurement for the Valley Line West. So that part was part of this audit. And no issues found with that at this point. I mean, in the future, there could be another audit on things that are happening that are new, and that would definitely be something we could do, but we did already look at some of those lessons learned.
Yeah. I guess, and I appreciate you looked at some of them. I'm wondering if there's, and it's hard to sort of audit what we don't know, but are there things that respecting that we've gone through as our city administration has gone through and identified what they felt was important to apply? Is there anything that as you went through that you were surprised that you didn't see as an example, or is that, and again, it's hard because hard to know what we should have been doing and maybe haven't done, but that I think is part of what the conversation is that folks would want to have.
And I can say we did have our subject matter experts look into this as well, and there was nothing identified by them either.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess there were some questions earlier around, again, impacts to local businesses, impacts to homeowners and folks who are renting in an area, and just everyone, I guess, and trying to understand again if there was, and again, I appreciate it's hard because in the contract there were certain communications requirements which have since been adjusted in Valley Line West, but even just trying to make sure that we've got a clear process. I'm going to be out of time, but I'll just share it, and then I might come back for a second round. Is that how we make sure that people are properly engaged throughout the process, and that their concerns that they're raising are properly being heard and addressed as best as possible. I'll govern myself and won't let you answer now, but might come back around.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Knack. I know you want to give a quick response to Councillor Knack, or you want to wait till you come for a second round?
I'll maybe wait and have him tell me the question again.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that that P3 auditor found that P3 procurement model was done in a fair, open and transparent manner, and also that the contract, the way it's designed, protects our financial interests, right? But it is frustrating. It is frustrating that here we are 3 years behind on this project, and I understand the very narrow scope of the audit. So it's not in any way a reflection what I'm trying to say is on that, right? But it is, if Edmontonians are watching this conversation and read that report, if they're applying the technical narrow scope lens, they probably understand why there's no recommendation. But if they're looking at the overall frustration that this project has caused, and that's where maybe this is to Adam, to you. Now, Andre is tasked with undertaking a very comprehensive review of this project along with other large projects. Can you tell me where that process is?
Yeah, it's a major project review. It's nearing completion. Not to share information before it's produced, but I think one of the findings that we had, again, goes to the scale of projects like this, is that, and it doesn't offer sympathy for the delays, but it does maybe put it into context that these challenges do arise with these major capital projects. And in some of our research, we've found a professor that's done analysis on over 16,000 what would be called projects like this, mega projects. And the stats aren't great. 8.5% meet the on-time and on-budget performance. And that's just, again, a reflection of how complex these projects are and how one issue can become a large issue and create challenges for delivery. So I know it doesn't alleviate the frustration of the impacts, but when, I guess what I'm trying to highlight, that projects of this nature are so large and significant that we have to be prepared for some of the challenges that could materialize.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand that. I know other cities are in similar situation, Ottawa, Calgary, and others, right? So, but I think, so are we then designing these projects in a way that we are so focused on financial protection, which is absolutely important, and quality, which is absolutely important, that we are not actually looking at, okay, maybe then there has to be a flexibility on the completion timelines.
So from a risk transfer perspective, a P3 model is driven by incentivizing the contractor to finish. And so then that financial, and so if we had our budget schedule quality triangle, quality and budget will not suffer on this project. And if we run into quality issues, they correct at their dime. But if there are issues, then schedule does.
No, and I appreciate that. I think that is very important.
And if you choose a different delivery model where there's more of a risk transfer, then yes, there could be an opportunity to favor one over the other.
Yeah.
So if we undertake a particular project and it's a traditional design bid build, we could potentially see a case where we would be paying for these impacts and still experiencing scheduled delays, but it all comes down to the risk transfer. And so and one of the, again, and I know you appreciate it, Mr. Mayor, the financial components to this, and I did get confirmation to Member Madabambo's question. The analysis that was done on this project showed that there was it is public, it's online, a $574 million benefit to deliver this way versus the traditional way. So again,
I remember those conversations. I was here for those conversations. But I think what I'm trying to understand is a balance of frustration. Like, we can protect financial interest, we can ensure quality, but there's a level of frustration among the community that they should have this service available 3 years ago, which is not. So what they're paying for is not, they're not getting that, right? So I think that's what I'm trying to understand, the balance of these.
Yeah, and so with the different delivery models, you can switch that risk transfer where we would take on some of that, and we might have to pay a lot more to ensure a delivery. So it's just trying to balance all of those things. The one thing we don't allow to relax on is quality. We will never relax on quality.
And we shouldn't at all, right? And okay, you were going to say something? Sorry, I'm out of time. Actually, I'll stop here. Councillor Cartmel?
Great, thank you. Good morning. I've sort of raised this question before, but I wonder if, so I would submit that part of the upset in the community is the delay, but the other part of the upset is that these big, long LRT projects have big impacts on a large part of the city and a large number of the people that are moving around the city. So there's not a lot, I guess there's one more leg on the mass transit network to contemplate looking into the future. Should we be breaking these projects up into smaller pieces and doing them in smaller pieces, one behind the other, so that we perhaps limit the upset and perhaps make the scope and budget more manageable and not so enormous that they almost become unmanageable in a way?
Councillor Cartmel, that is something that we've done in the past. South Extension was done that way, and something that sort of influences your approach to that is certainly market capacity. And right now, I think, the market is pretty hot. Prices are, inflationary pressures are pretty high. So it does present an option. But with each of these major projects, we do an industry assessment in terms of their ability to take on a project like this. But yeah, that is certainly a tool in the toolbox. And I think decision making related to the approach to delivery, industry ability or industry capacity is something that influences it.
Well, and perhaps you can answer this too, Mr. Loughlin. And that is that I think when the funding has come, it came at least on the Southeast line with the P3 requirement, but the funding from the other levels of government is coming all in one great big piece. So there's almost I don't know if it's an urgency, but it's, here's a bucket of money to build this whole line. And I wonder if there's not a little bit of, we have to spend it and we have to spend it now while we're getting it. And is there a way to perhaps talk to those other levels of government about trickling the dollars out over a longer period of time to allow a line to be built or an extension to be built, but built in phases so that it, for the reasons I was just sort of talking about. I guess the other way to say that, is there a funding pressure to do them all at once and do them as great big projects, or is there an ability to stretch that out a little bit from a funding perspective?
And Stacy could chime in on this, but every grant that in my time at the city that we've received has come with an expectation of delivery date within a period of time that we negotiate with our grant partners. Certainly more latitude would be helpful for us, but it is a challenge that it comes with a specific date, and sometimes they're politically driven, sorry to be direct.
Yeah, well, spend it now so we can see the end of it, kind of a thing.
Correct, and the benefit that we have from implementation of our PDDM is that we want to get to a place where we're clear on scope, schedule, and budget to a certain degree of accuracy before we're pursuing those grants, because we've had other instances where we pursued a grant and the expectation hasn't met the budget realities or schedule realities.
Yeah, so being a bit more deliberate might be one of the lessons we can learn from this.
Agreed. I would love it if we had a lot more flexibility in our grant dollars, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cartmel. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Just you mentioned the PDDM model that you've instituted here. Was that at all assessed in the project agreements? Like, what sort of a model do they use? Any good?
So this Valley Line Southeast was pre-PDDM, but we were able to actually advance this project to a healthy level of design before we went out to the market.
Okay, so you put into place sort of some, I guess, some controls in that in the project management for Transed and Marigold to?
No.
Okay.
So again, it's like the financial risk transfer. The approach to deliver the project is also transferred to the consortium.
Okay.
They determine the method to finish the design, to procure whatever they need to procure, and execute the construction. Our role in a project like this, where it is a risk transfer model, a significant risk transfer model, is to ensure that they adhere to the project agreement and the deliverables that are identified within the project agreement.
Okay, but part of determining those deliverables in the project agreement isn't that they have to have a formalized project management?
Bruce or Chris can speak to like an expectation, but they have to have engineers that are registered and accredited for the location that they're building. They have to adhere to safety requirements that the city expects. They need to ensure that they're submitting schedules to outlay the work that they're doing. So there's those types of requirements, but in terms of the mechanisms around how you approach project management, like we do with our own staff, that's something we transfer to them.
Because the city's PDDM is pretty successful, right, in getting things done on time, on budget?
It absolutely is, and it goes back to Councillor Cartmel's question that when we start to get into these projects that pursue grants, our comfort level is that we get to checkpoint 3 so that we have a certainty of scope, schedule, and budget. I think certainly on this project, we got to a point in design where we were comfortable. What I would argue is that in this case, this is related to project contractor performance and the challenges that they've experienced on the project, to which we're holding them accountable, certainly to the terms of the PA.
Okay, not related to their ability to manage a project of this scale?
There are qualifications that they need to meet. For large projects, we require contractors to prove that they can manage projects at this scale.
Okay,
And
okay,
so,
that's what I'm trying to get at.
So they do that.
Okay.
And in the case of our major projects, we go through a qualification process to enable them to bid. If they don't meet those requirements from a qualification perspective, they're not permitted to bid.
Okay.
And again, you look at the firms that form this consortium, these are all international, reputable.
That have had experience managing
Correct.
projects of this size. Okay.
Correct.
Bruce, did you have?
Yeah, Councillor Wright, also, we do require these contractors through our project agreements to follow industry best practices and produce things like design management plans, construction management plans, requirements management plans. The same things that we would expect of ourselves, we incorporate into the project agreement, and the contractors do have to produce those as a part of it.
Okay, so it's not from lack of experience or anything. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Mack, you wanna, I don't see you on board, but you had a question from your previous round that you need an answer to, right?
I actually just thought I would speak to it instead of asking it in the form of a question.
Okay. All right, so, so to city auditor, like, why the project is delayed in investigating that was not in the scope of this audit?
No, that's under the private partner, which we can't audit legally.
So we will never find out then why pillars were defected, why the wires were defected, like, or other defects. Like, if we don't find out what the root causes were, then how we would learn from them and make sure that doesn't happen in the future.
It's that you wouldn't be using the city auditor to find those out, and there would be some other mechanisms that are in place for that. Maybe I can pass that on to Adam.
So to a degree, Mr. Mayor, we can do some of that, but then we also need to be careful that we're not creating a situation where we create claim risk for the city of Edmonton.
Another risk management there.
Correct.
Right? Okay. But you wouldn't want it, like, you would want to know so that
Oh.
we can, right?
And sorry, rest assured, we know, but based on the current state of the project, there are limitations on how much we can share as it relates to the issues, because
So as administration, you would know, but you would be restricted in sharing with the
public
that
Correct.
are actually owners of this project, right, through their taxes, right? So
well, and I mean, that goes to governance as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, you know, council entrusts administration to ensure that we're holding the contractor accountable, that we're protecting the interests of taxpayers, and we feel we've done that. And
Oh, absolutely.
at times, you know, I'd love to go out and tell people the results of different legal outcomes related to projects, but we just know that we can't, and it creates bigger risk for the city.
Yeah, no, I give you credit for, you know, designing and protecting the financial interests of the city and taxpayers, as well, and ensuring that project is built to the quality specified in the contract. So please don't take me wrong in any way. I do give you credit for that. It's the frustration of the not having access to the service that people paid for. Yeah. And not knowing why that happened, right?
Extreme partnership in that frustration with Edmontonians. This is extremely frustrating for us as well. What I will say is that we've done our best to make sure that a service is provided, so the bus service continues to run, and without disclosing specifics, at a cost-effective manner for the city of Edmonton.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think Councillor Cartmel makes a very astute observation around how we engage with our partners on this. Maybe there's an opportunity to have conversations with the province and the federal government, particularly the federal government now they're coming forward with long-term transit funding that's permanent, right? And there's no, I mean, it's not a one-time grant funding, right? It's ongoing funding. Maybe there's more flexibility to divide these projects into different smaller segments, and also give opportunities for local contractors to do the work instead of big consortiums.
It's certainly welcoming. This might come off, I don't know how this will come off, but these one-time grants have extreme competition across the country.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to secure grants, folks will do their best to make sure that that happens. So, I mean, there is a competition to actually secure the funding, and it comes with the risk that you're going to run into not meeting expectations.
Yeah. And there's
The notion of predictable, dedicated, flexible funding from an infrastructure perspective is very welcome.
Yeah, and we see that, like, we the P3 requirement was enforced upon us. We had to accept it. So it comes with conditions. Less conditions, better it is for that's the lesson I take from this. Okay, good. Thank you so much. So that concludes the questions on this. Can someone move the recommendation, please? Who would like to do that? Councilor Wright? Okay, go ahead. You'll be the mover for all of the stuff today.
Okay. Get ready to talk here. That the September 22, 2023 Office of the City Auditor Report, OCA 02048, be received for information, and that the administration's response report number, IIS 02020, be received for information.
All right, so we have motions on the floor. At this time, I will open the floor to for members of council and committee to speak. Councilor Knack.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sohi. Yeah, I just thought instead of asking more questions, I'll sort of speak to it because, again, I recognize that this audit, the scope was very specifically defined and has been accomplished, and there are no recommendations from this particular scope, and so that is entirely reasonable based on scope. So I'm not mad about the audit. I'm not mad about the admin response. I'm not mad even on the outstanding things I'm going to raise, but I do want to raise them for what I think we need to think about going forward. I would worry that if this was covered today, if there was a news story being written on this audit, if there wasn't nuance to explain that this audit only was covering these specific things, I could envision a story that said, Valley Line Southeast audit shows that there were no issues, which if you were then reading that lack of nuance, you might look at that and say, what is going on? How could one say that? How could one come to that conclusion? And so I appreciate that the nature of the P3 makes it challenging to audit certain aspects. But I think what I would reflect on going forward, if I'm reflecting on this and what can we do differently as an audit committee, what can we expect differently from the city auditor's office and administration, is that when you have an audit planned on something that has a lot of public attention and scrutiny, where there have been issues, maybe we need to take a step back and say, this is an audit that will require more time. We don't want to do a very narrowly focused audit that only looks at this one piece. We're going to try to expand it, meaning we might not do 2 or 3 extra audits that year. We might spend more time on one in order to really dig into the areas that we can effectively audit. So that's something I think we need to think about going forward, and something I still think we would probably want to see in the future, even on this project. Back in 2015, there was an audit completed on 3 major projects at the time, the Metro Line, the Grote Road Bridge, and the Walterdale Bridge. And it was one of the hardest audits we've ever had in terms of the amount of recommendations and some of the challenges that were identified, but it was also, I think, one of the best in terms of the action that came from that and the ability to go out to Edmontonians and show here is how we expect to be better based on this detailed list of work. And so, I don't feel that same sense of purpose and ability to show that that's what's different. I have communicated and will continue to communicate that we did learn a lot from this project and have since applied some of that to the Valley Line West LRT. And at the same time, I'm very aware of the fact that even in the West End right now, there are plenty of conversations. There were news stories just yesterday around how some public members and some businesses are feeling a little bit left out right now. And I wouldn't disagree with with the way they've portrayed that and their feedback in the stories that were shown yesterday. So this audit doesn't give anyone that is currently in dealing with a larger scale project of this design any certainty around what's going to be different and to specifically address those concerns. And so again, I don't necessarily have the solution right here. I don't think this is I don't have a subsequent motion to write, but I would hope that this is not the end of the verification of this particular project, because I think people want to see a little bit more to make sure that council has a better understanding, to make sure, and I know administration has done a lot of great work to apply to future projects, but I don't think I've had closure yet. This audit has not given me closure, and I hope we can do that in the future. So I think something we should reflect on going forward. So obviously I'll support this. Again, this audit was very good. I'm glad the financial risk was not absorbed by the city. It was pushed onto others, but I think we need to do more on projects that have such impact on the public going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you. You know, I echo a lot of the tensions that Councillor Knack has articulated so well in his closing to this. And I think even Mr. Burrows is questioning, you know, the answer to that wasn't necessarily satisfactory to me, because I still think that there's always, you know, that tension of what is the scope, and we want to always be realistic to what an auditor can actually do. But sometimes especially with this one, it does feel very limited in scope, and I wonder what middle ground there could have been. And then I think about our processes. You know, we approve an annual plan, and then we do get memos that talk about the scope prior to the engagement. But I don't know if there's necessarily a check-in again where we say, okay, yeah, this is based on when we originally had our meetings with the city auditor and talked about what we wanted audited and what were the problems we were seeing. Based on approving the plan, there's not really another check-in mechanism until you come back with the report. Because even when I've gotten those memos, I don't think there's an opportunity for me to say, whoa, this isn't in scope. And if there is, then maybe we need to talk about that further too, because I haven't gotten that impression. Because this does feel very limited in scope to me, and I am struggling. I feel very lukewarm about saying yes to this report, and not because it's not a great quality audit, and not because I don't agree with everything that's in the content of the audit. I do think it's a very good quality audit for what the scope was, and I think that there is evidence that we have, from a financial perspective, really protected our assets. But I never questioned that going into this audit either. Like, I already knew that prior to getting this report today, that our assets were very protected in the structure of this contract. And I've been articulating that to Edmontonians. So I don't feel like this also provided any new information to me. So I do feel like there's a miss in terms of what we were hoping to get from this audit and what we received. So I'm struggling to square that with myself. So I don't know if other auditors have any closing remarks on this, but I am really struggling to say yes. I likely will say yes. But I do think this does require further conversation with the city auditor on those scopes, and how we make sure that we're not limiting ourselves too much or making them so broad that we get scope creep. Because I think we've worried so much about scope creep that we've maybe limited ourselves a little bit too much in some contexts. So I guess I've talked myself into saying yes, with the caveat that I will absolutely be following up to say, okay, how do we hit the mark better with scope in future conversations, and agree with Councillor Knack, this can't be the end of this conversation on Valley Line for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. I also want to stress that point, that Edmontonians understand that the scope of this audit was very narrow and was to determine whether the procurement process was fair, open, and transparent, which absolutely finds, that this audit finds and validates what we have been hearing from administration. Another part was whether the project was agreement was designed to protect the financial interests of the city. That's what we heard from administration. So this validates that as well. But I absolutely, there are tons of questions related to this LRT projects that have not been answered. I know that was not the scope of this project, absolutely, but we need to dig deeper into those questions to give Edmontonians all the answers that are on their mind, all the answers that are on this council's mind, and we need to find a way. I hope that the comprehensive review that city manager is taking on big projects will touch on those, some of those, may answer some of those questions. We also need to find a way to work with our private sector proponent in this, that I want to know what happened with those pillars. I want to know what happened with those wires or other delays, and we have an owner's engineer. What the role of the owner's engineer is in this? Why those things were not detected or identified earlier? So there are tons of questions that I don't want anyone listening to this conversation and looking at this auditor, this report, and says that we have that somehow there's that these questions have been answered. They have not been answered, and we will be continue to asking those questions and continue to impress upon our administration to find a way to get us those answers. It's it is frustrating. We pay for services, and we expect those services to be delivered on time. In this case, Edmontonians have been waiting for 3 years, and they still continue to wait. And there's no comfort for them hearing that financial interest. Maybe there's a comfort. Absolutely, there's a comfort knowing that financial interest was protected, that quality product will be delivered, but they don't have a product to use yet. And I think that is the frustration. And I look forward to further conversation on this. Business have been impacted, communities have been impacted, commuters have been impacted, and we need to give answers to those the questions that be on people's mind. And look forward to Andre's report, and look forward to other opportunities afterward. And I will be open as well. If I want to stay this to administration. Through all this process, through Andre's review and other questions we will raise, if we are not satisfied that we are unable to dig deeper into what went wrong, I will be comfortable asking the province to come in and do a very comprehensive review of this project and get deeper into the answers and questions. So, with that, I will ask if any other members want to speak. Otherwise, go to Councillor Wright to close. No? Okay. Okay, please vote.
We have all the votes.
That is carried. Okay. Okay, that was this. Now, next one is 7.5 and 7.6, capital asset management audit, and 7.6, administrative response to capital asset management. Okay. All right. We will go to City Auditor for our presentation.
Right, thank you. So the audit team for this audit included myself when I was the Deputy City Auditor, along with Fahim Rajabali, Senior Auditor, Pauline Powler, Auditor, and Alfred Apea, our Data Scientist. The objective of this audit was to determine whether the city manages its capital assets to optimize investment in existing infrastructure. This includes developing and maintaining a policy, strategy, and plans to guide, integrate, and direct asset management throughout the city. Evaluating asset management practices to improve and align practices across the city, and implementing asset management practices that align with asset management policy, strategy, and plans. This audit focused on the city's processes for funding capital asset renewal. So we didn't look at acquisitions, new construction, operations, or maintenance of capital assets. As well, we didn't look at IT assets, as that was done under a separate audit. And the next slide, please. So the city has improved the average condition of its existing infrastructure since 2010. At the end of 2010, approximately 18% of its assets were in poor or very poor condition, compared to less than 10% at the end of 2021. It also has a governance structure in place for capital asset management that includes the infrastructure asset management policy and infrastructure strategy, and asset management plans for some of its significant asset categories. So to further enhance and improve the city's capital asset management practices, we made 5 recommendations that you see on the slide. So we found that the policy and strategy do not fully align with some of capital asset management best practice criteria. The city has not developed the first generation of asset management plans for all significant assets. The city does not have guidance for asset disposition. The city also does not have guidance for asset data verification, and the city has developed performance measures for capital asset management practices. However, it has not yet developed a level of service framework. Effective asset management governance, supported by accurate and complete asset information, enables the city to make the most of its assets to deliver services that are valued to Edmontonians. Clear performance measures and regular evaluation will allow the city to measure its progress in achieving its asset management goals and identify and remedy gaps in asset management practices. And I think the administration has a presentation.
We do have a presentation, so if we could get that up. Pascal Ladisseur and Clem Young are here in person. We'll deliver the presentation, and Murray Johnson is online to support and answer any questions.
This presentation is administration's response to the Office of the City Auditor's Capital Asset Management Audit. Presentation provides context about asset management within the City of Edmonton organization, the evolution and current state of asset management practices at the city, and administration's response to the audit and next steps. Asset management is the coordinated activities to realize value from our assets. The ultimate goal is to maximize the benefits, manage the risks, and provide the appropriate level of service in a sustainable manner. Within the City of Edmonton, the asset management activities of acquiring, operating, maintaining, renewing, and disposing of assets are performed by various business areas. Our assets and activities of these business areas directly or indirectly support the delivery of services to Edmontonians. Each of the business areas govern and manage their day-to-day responsibilities as part of their operations and as part of implementing their business plans. The practice of performing asset management activities has been ongoing since the day that infrastructure assets have been required to deliver services to our citizens. The formalization of asset management and the associated practices came to the forefront in the 1990s as infrastructure built during the early boom times began reaching the latter part of their useful lives. The City of Edmonton was one of the first Canadian cities to recognize the need for a strategic plan to manage our infrastructure and created our first infrastructure strategy in 1998, which brought awareness to the concept of an infrastructure gap. And since that time, the City of Edmonton has continuously matured and improved our asset management practices, including developing the standardized ABCDF condition rating system, ongoing reporting of infrastructure state and condition, developing the risk-based infrastructure management system to support capital renewal budget planning, implementing a neighborhood infrastructure renewal program, creating an infrastructure asset management policy, and regular updates to our infrastructure strategy. And that doesn't include the operational improvements that we've made. The Office of the City Auditor provided 5 recommendations in their report, and all were accepted by administration. The first is to update the infrastructure asset management policy and infrastructure strategy. Administration has already begun working on the updates, and we will be bringing both to council in the first half of 2024 for approval. The second recommendation is to guide the development, approval, and regular updates of asset management plans for significant asset categories. Administration has developed first-generation asset management plans for 6 significant asset categories, and we have been preparing to develop the next iteration of plans, leveraging the improvement plans in the current ones. The intent is to update the plans once every 4 years to align with our capital budget cycle. Administration will use the learnings from these first 6 plans to complete asset management plans for the other asset categories. Due to the amount of resources required to develop comprehensive plans, administration will work between now and the end of 2027 to complete the remaining plans. The next recommendation is to develop guidance on asset disposition, including regular asset portfolio reviews. Administration started developing an asset rationalization framework in 2022 and has recently completed a pilot of the framework. As part of the asset rationalization program, administration is planning to develop procedures and begin reviewing the portfolio of assets. The procedures are planned to be completed by the end of 2024. The fourth recommendation is to develop and communicate guidance for asset managers on the requirements of accurate and complete data. This requirement will be included as part of administration's update of the infrastructure strategy, and the formal guidance will be included or will be completed by the end of 2024. Currently, as part of our regular state and condition of infrastructure reports, we do provide instructions to business areas for providing data in a consistent manner. The last recommendation is to improve the city's capital asset management performance measures by developing a level of service framework to support asset managers and clearly defining strategic performance measures. Administration began reporting our current asset management enterprise performance measures in 2020, and the annual review and refresh process is currently underway. Administration has incorporated the development of a level of service framework into our work plans, and we will also be reviewing and improving our strategic measures to ensure that reporting is aligned with planned deliverables. Both of these items are planned to be completed by the end of 2025. In addition to the work directly related to the auditor's recommendations, administration also has an enterprise asset management team that works on continuous improvement initiatives to mature 5 pillars of asset management: governance, people, process, data, and tools. Some of their current work include clarifying roles and responsibilities, standardizing data processes, and assisting some areas in transitioning to a new geospatial information system. That brings us to our end of our presentation. In administration, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Now we'll go to questions from committee. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I was quite concerned when I was reading this. I'm just wondering, so decisions that we've made, particularly with budget, how many of those decisions were made with incomplete or inaccurate information if we don't have a good understanding of what our assets are? I mean, I appreciate that we did get the one pretty complete report on the facilities and what that rating scale was, but with everything else, I'm wondering, like fleet vehicles, or what's our risk in having made those decisions without what I see as incomplete or inaccurate information?
So yeah, the audit, we made the recommendation to improve the guidance for verification, to verify data. We're not saying that it's not all good, right? So we found some instances, so that supports why having that guidance would be important. That data goes into the RIM system, and I'll have them explain that a bit better, but there are also other factors that are used to make decisions on that. So I don't want to imply that we don't think you were getting good information to make good decisions from that, but it can be improved, and that's why we're recommending that you implement that guidance, and so that people have that to follow and have a little more assurance that this is accurate and complete data that they're using.
Okay, yeah, exactly, because I'm just wondering, like, fleet vehicle requests that we received from all areas. Yeah, how accurate was that?
Councillor Wright, if I may, from our understanding of the data and process discrepancies that were found by the auditor, we do not believe that any of these discrepancies would have had impact on the analysis of the city's inventory of assets and the decisions that were made or guided through the renewal investments. So from our perspective, those discrepancies are minor and did not influence the decisions that were made.
Okay, so but from your perspective, like, I guess, how do we know that that perspective is accurate based on lack of data being properly recorded and monitored?
So we worked with the auditor and reviewed all of their findings that they were that they brought forward during their analysis, and based on those findings, we found that those data and process discrepancies were minor. And from our analysis, the vast majority of the data that we use and how we provide the information to council would not have been impacted by the discrepancies that were found by the auditor in their report based on our analysis and our review of those results.
Okay, but now the auditor didn't have the opportunity to review everything, right?
No, it was a very small sample that we looked at. It was more to sort of verify the potential risk that could be there, and there, to find some discrepancy. We didn't continue to look through everything, and that wouldn't have been of value, I don't think. And we, again, we don't want to imply that the data is not good and there aren't other controls in place to ensure that there's good decisions being made. This documentation will just help to improve that.
Okay, and the small sampling, can you say one way or another whether that's indicative of a larger sampling, or?
No, it was not statistical.
Okay. It's not statistical in that there wasn't enough sampling to be done to make it statistical?
Exactly. Yeah,
so there should have been maybe a greater...
Potentially we could have done that. It uses more resources and more time. Going with the recommendation on increasing guidance and having sort of the business areas, the data owners sort of have more documentation and more understanding is where we wanted to go with the recommendation. Additional testing would have taken a lot more time, and I don't know if the value would have been there from that. So we did make the decision not to do it.
Okay. And then I'm just wondering about the asset management practices that are being implemented. On just a portion of the assets, right? What do you call it? The first gen?
Oh, those are the asset management plans.
Okay.
Yeah, so they've created first generation for some of their significant areas, and the plans are to complete those.
Okay. And then I'm also just concerned with the time for management response on recommendation number 2 being put off till 2027. I'm wondering, can that be upped a little bit to make it prior to the next budget cycle?
For clarity, it's not being put off to 2027. We're going to be working through to 2027. There's a substantial amount of work related to the creation, update, review of all the asset management plans. We're talking about documents that range from 200 to 600 pages and relate to each of our asset types, which we have a significant amount. Mm-hmm. And so the work will be ongoing, and we are already in the process of incorporating the best practices, the recommendations. And for those that will be worked through, they will complement already existing practices. There's not lack of practices, there's lack of documentation.
Okay. I was just wondering if they could be broken down and prioritized, but I'm out of time.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Member Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My thoughts are actually along Councillor Wright's line of questioning with respect to recommendation number 2, because I as well remarked that 2027 is a long way out to have dealt with asset management plans. And I think in the city auditor's report, 2 of them are actually done in draft and unimplemented. And to me, it would seem like that's an easy win. That's an easy fix. Even if somewhat out of date, there's probably some utility in implementing those, putting them into the cycle, knowing that, as we work through the process, granted that there's a lot of material there to work through, that you may not come back to perhaps those plans until 25, 26, 27. But sitting here today, it seems like it is a very long time, especially if we've already got some baseline framework works completed. So help me understand why it does take so long.
One thing I'd like to clarify is that while they're in draft, they are implemented. The draft portion was the governance process was being worked through as we were implementing Enterprise Asset Management Team and the Corporate Asset Management Steering Committee. And so all of the asset management plans that exist are implemented. And furthermore, asset management practices are in place for each of our assets. What we are looking to do is document them and support continuous improvement in those areas. Clem, do you want to add anything?
I would say in terms of why it takes such a long time to do that is, one, the level of detail that we want to get into, but it also takes time to engage because the different asset management functions are performed by different areas across the corporation. It takes that time to engage all of the stakeholders to come up with a comprehensive plan.
Maybe just to add on to the Councillor Wright's question further to yours, Member Burrows, the goal here is to have the majority of these in place so that when we get into the next budget cycle, they're in hand so that the decisions that are made related to budget are prioritized on the basis of those that are completed. But just due to the volume, it's a significant undertaking, which we had already committed that we would undertake, which is kind of reflected in the initiated timeframe.
I have nothing further.
Thank you, Member Burrows. Now, Councillor Principe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about attachment 1, page 12. This of the auditor's report. It had mentioned about bridges are 100% required renewal, and all Edmontonians and all those visiting Edmonton, thank you for that, by the way. But I'm curious as to if part of the audit was to see what the schedule is for inspection of the bridges and if it's the standard or above standard.
That wasn't part of this audit. We have done that audit in the past, though.
And maybe I'll just go over to Mr. McLaughlin or Ms. Ladouceur.
Mr. Laughlin, but that's okay.
Oh, no, Mr. Laughlin or Ms. Ladouceur.
Yes.
You're best? Okay.
Depends on the question.
Please, yeah. Well, just about the inspection of the bridges, the timeline.
Yeah, so bridges are inspected per the best practices and regulations that are in place. I don't know if you can speak to the timeline. No, we can just gather the information. There are regular inspections. Their first level is visual, which is done by our city operations team as they do their maintenance of bridges. And then on a regular basis, we do what we call level 2, which are more intensive inspections, and those would be done every few years. I'll see if I can get the exact information.
Okay, and that can even just come as a memo later. That's not, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And another question for administration, the Corporate Asset Management Steering Committee. I noticed that it's mostly managers on there. Have we ever considered having a member from council on there or a public member? Just for a different perspective.
This is kind of where it gets into a bit of governance and you know, council set policy, administration implements. In saying that, I think there's you know, the outcomes of those products are something that gets put in front of council at points in time, specifically during budget and the CIO and the development of that. Murray, you wanted to say something?
Sorry, I was just coughing. No, I had nothing.
Sorry.
Okay, so in your opinion, it would not be ideal to have
It would be my recommendation, no.
Okay, and you're correct. It does come in front of council. Anyways, okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Principe. Next, we'll go to Member Matamombe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one question for the city auditor and the other for the administration. So for the city auditor, on the out-of-scope items, just coming back to in-scope, out-of-scope, are there any plans to carry out audits for the areas that are out of scope?
Yeah, those areas will be part of our risk identification assessment for the plan for 2024. They're all large, very complex areas, and so to do them all at once, it would have taken, you wouldn't have this report for a while, so breaking them up does make more sense. So, and yes, some of those will be part of that, and potentially, I can't say yet, that plan's not developed yet, but potentially will be on the plan.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, that begs a question for the administration as well, given the timelines that are articulated in some of the implementations, in all the implementations for all the items identified, they are ranging from 24 to 27. Do you think you have the ability to deal with future audit issues arising?
This is work that we had planned to initiate. This has been on our work plan. Just based on the scale of the assets that we have, we feel this is an appropriate schedule. And like all audits, we welcome areas where there's identification for areas for improvement, and we'll be prepared for that on the basis of the plan that we've set out with the auditor on this.
Okay. And then given the timelines mentioned, are you still comfortable that, they are the right timelines? First of all, they appear to be too long.
Administratively, this is what we feel is appropriate as it relates to asset management decisions that are actively happening, both from a capital perspective and an operations and maintenance perspective, and put us in the best position to present the information before the next budget cycle.
Okay. Yeah, because the second point, and thanks for your response, is, do you foresee a chance or a situation whereby you will need to, revise the timelines because you're not able to meet the requirements?
In any of these where we see a need to prioritize based on risk, we absolutely will, and we'll ensure that we minimize the risk on the basis of our preparation of this. In terms of, again, just the volume of work required, we're not sure that we can do a good job if we try to accelerate this, because this is core infrastructure, core service as it relates to infrastructure from a maintenance and renewal perspective.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Just basic questions around the asset management. I understand that overall the conditions of what we own has improved from 18% in poor and very poor condition to 10% from 2010 to 2021. Do we have a kind of, maybe this to administration, do we know kind of the breakdown? For example, how are we doing in the roads, in buildings, in bridges, LRT, cars, buses, other assets that we own? Do we have, because some may be in better condition than others, right? So do we have that kind of breakdown?
Absolutely, Mayor. We publish it every year in our infrastructure report,
okay.
And it would be done by major categories, but we have the breakdown to the level you were describing, absolutely.
Okay, if you don't mind forwarding the previous report, because I want to learn more about which area are we doing better and which area we need to improvement on, and as we said, getting ready for the are you preparing for the next budget cycle? On the asset deposition, that's what we call it, when we get rid of assets, right? That's what the right word is, right? Or
yeah, kinder word is rationalization.
Rationalization, right? So the report is coming to us in October, you said?
We have an in-private report that's coming in October 13th, I believe is the date.
Okay.
And that'll be an extension of other in-private conversations that we've had with council related to asset rationalization.
Okay, so we'll wait till that report to come. Okay, and that's all. Just I know other questions have been asked. So okay, good. Councillor Wright.
Just wondering about the prioritization of those assets coming forward by 2027?
So
What are
the
you
asset
working on?
management plans?
Yeah.
Okay, so asset management plans are currently in place for a significant amount of our assets. And while we talk about categories, we've covered a very large proportion of our assets already through those first generation. Give you examples, we have bridges, buildings, paved roads, unpaved roads, sidewalks, pathways, trails, and stairs, as well as the urban forests, which is done through
And
AMP.
that was listed in the report.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so then I'm wondering, like, when the other ones are
So
coming through.
the ones that we've identified that are significant, that the AMPs have not been documented yet, include transit buses, the LRT infrastructure, fleet assets, and waste assets.
Okay.
And so those are our priorities for the next asset management plans to be developed.
Okay, so, yeah, good to know if we're buying more buses and LRT cars, that where we stand. Okay, yeah, I'm done, I guess. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Wright's question raises one question in my mind, like when we are looking at the improvements in the asset, like for example, if you have 10 buses, right, that are in poor condition, but then you buy 5 new buses, right, that improves the overall condition of the entire fleet, right, but those 10 buses will still be in very poor condition, right? So how do we, I just want to understand is how do we look at that? Like, can we break it down when we manage or when you report on an annual basis, whether what the age of the vehicle or the age of the infrastructure that is 40 years old, 50 years old, what condition that is in, instead of infrastructure that's only 10 years old?
So for clarity, in our databases, we have a condition assessment for each of our assets, which means that we know exactly that level of detail. We know that we have buildings that are from the 1920s that are in relatively good condition or that are in poor and failing condition. Like, we have that level of detail. When we report, we always, of course, bring it back up, and then you'll see the average reporting will show that we have so many number of our assets in each of our categories, A through F, as we've noted. So we both inform our asset management practices by looking at the average of our conditions, but absolutely make plans related to individual assets, or in the case of buses, categories of assets. So working with ETS to understand what their breakdown rates are, how is fleet doing with the renewal or the maintenance of those older buses, not being impacted by the fact that we are buying new buses that help the average, but doesn't help those at the bottom of that.
Oh, I see. So those that are at the bottom, we are seeing their conditions improved as well. Not just the buses, say buildings. Are we seeing some buildings might be old enough that we are going to dispose them? Right?
It depends on your level of investment. So on the basis of just looking at this most recent budget cycle, 23 to 26, we are going to have to make decisions administratively related to extending the life of an asset, because we just simply don't have renewal dollars to invest to the degree that we need to, and that was highlighted in the CIO through the budget process. So I see Carrie jumped on, but one of the considerations that we'll have when it comes to fleet is how do we extend that life in absence of the available funding to upgrade and replace that fleet. And we will be doing the same thing with roads. We will be doing more potholes because we're not doing the necessary reconstruction of the roads. We will be doing it with facilities where we repair a component rather than multiple components, because that's the critical element of renewal. So those are all the considerations that go into the true life cycle of an asset as it relates to operations, maintenance, and capital investment for renewal.
Okay. Carrie?
I was just going to say that I agree with the assessment, and I just hopped on the call in case they needed some backup.
All right, thanks. Okay, all right, so that concludes the questions. Councillor Wright, you want to move this again? Or Councillor
No, Councillor Principe wants to do this one.
Councillor Principe, you want to do that, okay.
I would be happy to move that.
Okay.
So I would like to move that the September 22nd, 2023 Office of the City Auditor Report, OCA 02046, be received for information, and that the September 22nd, 2023 Integrated Infrastructure Services Report, IIS 02011, be received for information.
All right, so we have motion on the floor. Anyone to speak? See, oops, wait, no. Deck is cleared. Now, anyone to speak? Seeing none, Councillor Principe, you want to close?
No, just
No?
thank
Okay.
you.
All right, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. And we are on to our last item, right? 7.1, 7.7, 7.8, IT asset management audit and administration response to IT asset management audit. Okay. We'll go over to City Auditor.
Thank you. So the audit team for this audit included Sharon Han, next to me here, a Deputy City Auditor, as well as Lily Vong, Senior Auditor, and Alfred Apea, our Data Scientist. And we did also engage the services of a subject matter expert for this audit. So the objective of this audit was to determine if the Open City and Technology Branch is managing IT assets to optimize the use of resources and safeguard these assets. We reviewed IT hardware and software assets under the branch's control, including those managed by a third-party IT asset service provider. Overall, we found that the Open City and Technology Branch is managing the city's IT assets to optimize the use of resources and safeguard them. However, we did make 2 recommendations that you see on the slide to further improve the branch's management of IT assets. So we found the branch can improve its guidance on IT asset management. Specifically, the device standards do not include replacement rates for some types of hardware. There's a lack of some procedures specific to providing IT assets to new employees, returning IT assets from employees who leave the city, and redeploying those assets. And the roles and responsibilities of the asset management office and asset users could be better documented as well. And we also found that some data in the software asset management tool is not updated in a timely manner. And I think there was no comment from administration, no opening remarks. So I think, no, Daryl's saying no, so we'll move on. Any questions?
All right, questions? Colleagues, Councillor Wright.
I did so enjoy reading all these reports. Okay. I'm just wondering, so we talk about returning assets from employees. There's no recommendation to follow up on that specifically?
Just to improve the guidance around it. We didn't find any missing laptops or anything like that.
Okay, and yeah, I'm just wondering what the risk is if people do hang on to them. I know they can't access their accounts and that, but what about documents or things like that? Are we at risk of, I guess, losing maybe some proprietary information? Or?
Councillor Wright, I would articulate that I believe the primary risk identified is more of a financial risk. So do we have assets sitting unused? So you have touched on it. The normal controls in place would prevent an ex-employee from being able to gain access to information. Similarly, that asset passed to a new user normally goes through a wiping process, so the new user inherits the asset without any specific or personal information on it. I believe the main concern here is just making sure that we're effectively deploying and redeploying our fleet of assets to minimize costs to the organization.
Okay, and I don't know where it is in the report, but there. One item that something is going to be done in conjunction with Enterprise Commons, and I'm just wondering, is there sufficient funds in Enterprise, because I think there's only about 30% left of their budget. Is there sufficient in that to complete the tasks noted?
Councillor Wright, apologies, I don't recall any. So nothing specific to this audit was tied to Enterprise Commons. The solutions in place and technologies talked about are outside of and will remain outside of Enterprise Commons and that software platform. So
That
the
might have
enhan-
been in the previous set of reports and I didn't twig onto it. Okay. Okay, darn, missed my opportunity there. I'm just wondering, oh, and then with the software licenses and that, talking about the third-party IT, were those discrepancies, were they found to be with the third party or with the city?
I would describe them as follows. Users that have subscribed to software as a service, which is that third-party software referred to here, that the acquisition of that software may not always be accurately or timely reflected in our own data repository. So it's a time and timing issue, as well as a technical challenge issue, and both of those we feel we can overcome it before the proposed deadline next year. So gaining better access to that information from those vendors, and then ensuring that that information is reflected in our database in as timely a fashion as possible. Pardon me.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Member Bros.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions might actually parallel Councillor Wright's again. And I guess the first one relates to the improved guidance on IT asset management. So I guess asked differently, we're not creating any inadvertent additional or incremental security risks from not replacing as often as we would like certain types of IT hardware. Is that a correct statement?
I think Daryl's answering, but he's off mute, but.
Thank you, apologies. Member Bros, the risk that you're articulating is not a risk that is actually present. So what the audit found, or what the finding here was related to prescriptive guidance. So by way of example, we lease many of our desktop assets. So that forces a refresh cycle. It ensures that they stay in a compliant state. For a small class of devices, we have not articulated those standards. So the report cites two of those classes. Monitors, which are devices that do not contain information, so very low security risk, and Apple devices, and we are working on enhancing that. We do now have some ability to oversee a very small portion of Apple devices that exist in this organization. So with that ability to see them, we've got the ability to understand the patch levels that they are at or the security levels they are at, and be able to push the security updates to those devices. So again, what I would suggest here is most of this is about refining our process, better documenting our process, making sure our processes are understood by asset users and asset managers.
Thank you. Second follow-up question then I suppose also relates to software subscription. And I guess my concern is, are we confident that if we have a discrepancy, a delta between the vendor and the city, do we have any unrecorded liability for licensing out there that we haven't actually paid for? You're on mute again.
He's talking again, but we did not find that, I could say, when we did the audit.
Yeah, and I would echo something very similar. Similarly, not touched on in the audit report or the administrative response to it. The controls around the acquisition of that type of software have been working in conjunction with our corporate procurement partners enhanced. So that category of purchase is now deemed a restricted category, meaning it explicitly requires the sign off by someone within the Open City and Technology branch asset management area. So we do still run the risk if somebody does something truly inadvertent, takes a personal credit card and makes a purchase. But by restricting the category, we can now rely on financial reports and credit card statements as well to quickly audit and assess where purchases, out of bounds purchases may have been made.
So said differently, this would be a discrepancy between our tool, which tracks the licenses compared to the vendor, not between procurement and the vendor.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
have nothing further.
Thank you, Member Bros. So that concludes the questions on this. Del, can you mute yourself? There you go. Thank you. Councillor Wright?
Well, I think I'd like to move that the September 22nd, 2023 Office of the City Auditor Report OCA 02047 be received for information, as well as the administration's response report FCS 02017 be received for information.
All right, so we have motion on the floor. Anyone to speak? Seeing none, Councillor Wright to speak? Councillor Close or no? Okay, we ready to vote? Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Response to consular inquiries, none. Private reports, we done. Sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. I missed that. There are some questions on 9.1, right? So we need to reconsider that. So okay, I think everyone agrees.
We can load some language on that for you. Just give us 1 second.
Or I can just ask everyone, is that will be okay? Or is anyone has any objections for us reconsidering 9.1? Councillor Rutherford?
No.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, go in camera then. Can someone move that we go in camera?
So moved.
Okay, please vote to go in camera.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay. We'll give you about 5 minutes to clear the room and lock the doors.
Just waiting on one vote. We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay. Can someone move the? I can move it. Okay, I'll move the recommendation. And keep it private, 1 and 2, or I can read it here. That September 22nd, 2023 Financial and Corporate Services Report, FCS 01918 be received for information. Part 2, that is September 22nd, 2020 the Financial and Corporate Services Report, same, remain private pursuant to Section 16, disclosure of harmful business interests of the third party, and 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Okay. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay. All right, so that concludes the report to be dealt with at a different time. None. Request to reschedule. Oh, no, we've done that. Okay. Private reports. Motions pending. None. Notes of motions or motions without customary notice. Seeing none, we are adjourned.